Welcome to the Bad Roman Podcast. On this show, we talk with veterans, community leaders, Christians and non-Christians as we explore the entanglement of Christians with the state. The Bad Roman Project was created out of the firm belief that as Christians, we are called to follow Christ, not the state. Here is your host, Craig Hargis.
Hey folks, today I have Kerry Baldwin back on the show. Kerry was on our second episode where we discussed our article, The Virulence of Moral Panic, and if you haven't listened to that episode, I encourage you to go check it out after you've listened to this. A lot of what Kerry said in that episode has proven to be true where the coronavirus scare is concerned. But today we're going to talk about a very cool project she's working on, and that is her Socratic seminars she holds online.
Let's go. Right. Would you rather serve God than serve Caesar? You feel me? Right. I'm just trying to live what he said. I'm just trying to live what he said. I ain't scared. I will take one to the head. Go ahead. So it's safe to say that I'm bad. So it's safe to say that I'm bad.
So how is, and I tell people all the time, and I think I told you before we started recording, that if you don't know who Kerry Baldwin is, you really should check her out on Facebook because she gets really animated about how this coronavirus thing has affected her in New Mexico. And how are you holding up in New Mexico, the communist New Mexico?
Well, I mean, we're here, we're surviving. We are one of two states that are still technically on lockdown. So California being the other one. Our governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, who is jockeying for a cabinet position in the Biden-Harris administration, has recently renewed our health order and lockdown just this past weekend. And she's gone back to, reducing or banning mass gatherings over 5 people. And she's now even gone as far as to say that we're limited to how many outings we can take. We can only have 3 outings. We can go to work. We can go to childcare if we have that, if that's a category in our life. And then we can do 1 self-care outing a day. So grocery store, Target trip, whatever. Of course, right now, there's no way that she can actually enforce that. But when we had the mask mandate, and we've had the longest standing mask mandate in the United States, we're the first ones to have a mask mandate. Nobody really understood how she was going to enforce that either, but she did it through encouraging peer pressure and bullying. And she leveraged the restaurant industry and sort of held them at gunpoint, so to speak, and threatened everybody else. If you don't obey, then the restaurants are going to get shut down. And restaurants here, I mean, a huge part of our economy are our restaurants. And so, that created a lot of tension among the people. And so people started bullying each other. And it was insane. It was absolutely insane. But now New Mexicans have grown a little wiser. I think they're not taking her orders as seriously as they did. At least they don't appear to be. Typically, New Mexico is very politically apathetic, which I think worked against us initially in the lockdown because everybody went along with it. But now I think the political apathy is working to our favor because people are starting to see this is not the big scary monster that we were told that it is. And we have a life to live. We have things to do. We cannot, sit here and be dictated to by a tiny tyrant up in Santa Fe. So, it really sucks though, because she has shut down a lot of our economy. She canceled our balloon fiesta. We have the International Balloon Fiesta every single year, which accounts for 1/3 of our annual income for all businesses and 1/3 of the revenue for the state. So that's going to really hurt us in the long run. Usually this time of year, we are enjoying the smell of roasted green chilies. I've not seen the roasters out.
Oh, love that.
Yeah, I have not seen the roaster salad. I have not smelled the roasting green chili, which I miss. So, she claims to be, New Mexican and claims to love our heritage, and she has completely shut all of that down. She's saying no Halloween, no Thanksgiving, no Christmas. You guys are not allowed, you have to wear masks inside your home unless you're alone. It's utter insanity.
Now, what term is she in? Like, is she in her last term, or is she going to be able to run for re-election?
Well, yeah, she would be able to run for re-election, but we're only halfway through her first term. She's really banking on Biden and Harris winning, and she, like I said, she's jockeying for a cabinet position, specifically the Health and Human Services Department, which kind of freaks me out a little bit because, New Mexico often gets left in the dust when it comes to national media. Like, we don't get a whole lot of attention over here. And people should be paying attention to what she's doing, because if she does actually get this cabinet position, if Biden wins and she gets this cabinet position, she's going to be doing all of the same crap she did here to the rest of the country.
Well, the reason I asked if she was going to be running for re-election, like the governor of Arkansas, Asa Hutchinson, is somebody that I've grown to despise. Like, his Facebook post every day updating coronavirus things, and this many people have tested positive today, but he's in his last term. Like, he's not eligible to run again for governor. And so wonder why. So sometimes I wonder if he's just doubling down to try to finish whatever legacy he thinks he's going to have as governor of Arkansas. And I'm noticing like a lot of people that comment on his Facebook posts, like it was one way, it was one-sided for a long time. Everybody's thanking him for his service and thank you for protecting Arkansans and this and that. I'm thinking, good grief, but it's starting to shift the other direction where people are getting sick of this. And you and I talked about that in the episode about your article, Virulence of Moral Panic. And I remember telling you, I was like, at some point, people are going to get sick of all of this garbage, and they're going to tell the state to get bent. And I'm starting to notice that a little bit with Arkansans, like even like my friends and family that still live there. They're tired of it. Not everybody. No, don't get me wrong. There's still some on there like are still going by this. You got to wear a mask. One thing I've noticed this past week, like the coach of Alabama caught COVID, and they are adamant about wearing a mask. And Kamala Harris, some of her people in her camp caught COVID. And they've been wearing masks this whole time.
Yeah.
The masks are not doing what you think they're doing. All you're doing is restricting your oxygen to your brain. And I think it's making you not be able to think like you're supposed to.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing is clearly very frustrating. I think our governor in particular is sort of fueled. I mean, that phrase from Friedrich Hayek about the fatal conceit, totally describes our governor, because on the one hand, we've actually had a very low fatality rate here. Like, I think our fatality rate here has been, well, I'm going to get that number wrong, so I'm not going to mention it. But anyways, it's been significantly much lower than our surrounding states. And the governor has attributed that as a success to her methods. Like, she literally believes that she is the reason for us having a low fatality rate. And the other piece of information is that all those Californians who are, leaving California, they're moving out in droves. They're coming here to New Mexico because it's cheap. And so she thinks because New Mexico is attracting these this influx of people from California, that people actually want her to be like this. They want her to be, overly maternal. I mean, this is sort of the Oedipal mother, if you want to attribute a psychological term to her. She's totally has the Oedipal mother complex. But, she is very convinced of her own superiority, and she is convinced that she is the reason why our fatality rate is low, and we have to double down now and get on it and gosh darn it, you New Mexicans, you're screwing things up for me. Like that's how she talks. It's really weird.
It sounds like, I'm sorry, but that's hilarious.
That's
It
all right.
sounds like, and we're getting a little off track on what we want to talk about, but I want to say this, like, so I live right outside of Memphis, and the city of Memphis is super liberal. And I'm not saying this is just a liberal thing, like, because the governor of Arkansas is a Republican. So this is, it goes on both sides.
Yeah.
But like the city of Memphis Facebook page, for example, they posted something the other day, and they were showing the amount of cases since this started. It was like 38,000 or something. I don't remember the exact number. But to the left, it showed the amount of recoveries, and it was like 37,000 recoveries. And to the right, it showed how many people have died from it. It was like 500 and something. And I looked at this and I said, do y'all not see this? Look at the number on the left compared to the number of cases and compared to the number on the right. Look at how many people have survived this, and you're shutting people's lives down for this. It doesn't make any sense. Now, I get it. People are sick and people die from it. I get it. It happens every year with the flu season. And guess what? We're coming right back into flu season. What's going to happen next? It's over. People have to recognize that this is over. We're just going to catch the flu. But now, and there was another thing that they came out and said, flu cases are down this year. No kidding. We're calling it something else now.
Well, and this is, I mean, you mentioned earlier that sometimes I get animated on my Facebook page about this, and I try and really temper my posts about it, because it does genuinely upset me. And part of the reason why is that I used to work in the medical field. I used to work in medical laboratory science. And so I know a little bit about how the immune system functions and how immunity works in our bodies. And what really gets at me is that all of these preventative measures that we're using, the masks, the social distancing, reducing family gatherings, not going to church, all of these things are genuinely important to us as social creatures, as social human beings. And because of that, because we are social creatures, that contributes to our health and our well-being. And so, all of these measures ultimately are not only counter to a long-standing history of science when it comes to how immunity works and how we build up immunity and adapt to pathogens around us, including novel viruses like this one. But every single aspect of human connectivity, right? Even just being able to see each other's faces has a psychological impact on you. So what we are doing is removing humanity from human beings in the name of preventing the spread of a virus that really has a very, very low mortality rate. And that is completely anti-human. And I just think I think it's a crime against humanity. And I've said that a number of times on Facebook now. I think what is going on right now is a crime against humanity. I
completely agree. All right. So I think we just released a lot of frustration on each other talking about coronavirus. We agree on everything.
We've had our therapy session.
Yeah. Thank you for your service, Kerry. So let's talk about this project that you are working on. And I think this is very cool. And it's trying to get people to understand how, or to learn how to critically think about things. And I think that's something that is very lacking in today's society, and we need more of it. And so when you first started talking about this on Facebook, I noticed what you were doing, but I thought it was just something like another, like a homeschool session, like for kids. But that's not true. This is for everybody. It's not just kids. It's for adults, teenagers and adults, So, and I think it's very cool that anybody can participate in this. And I think it's something that I would like to be involved with if time allows. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But what is the Socratic method?
Yeah. So, first of all, I have these sessions. I actually created a sort of a page on my website called Mere Liberty Courses. And the aim of this was to have these online classes, which taught the skills of critical thinking. And the Socratic method is just one way, and it happens to be a very effective way of teaching people how to critically think. So I really enjoy it. I mean, I have a degree in philosophy, and so I learned about the Socratic method when I was taking my degree, and certainly I've used this method with my own kids in homeschooling and even just teaching them about the world. The method is relatively simple, and that is that it encourages dialogue through open-ended questions and responses. So, a little bit of history. The Socratic method comes from or originates with the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates. And Socrates is usually best known for two things. One, he was sentenced to death by drinking hemlock. And two, he was accused of corrupting the youth of Athens. And those two things are actually related. He was sentenced to death because one, they believed he was corrupting the youth of Athens, and two, because he was said to be an atheist because he didn't believe, or they said that he didn't believe in the Greek pantheon of gods. And what's interesting though is that when you actually dive into who Socrates was and what he did, he would actually go around Athens and he would talk to people who were either said to be wise by other people or believed themselves to be wise. And, a lot of times these were, politicians from the Senate. So Socrates would engage in these dialogues just by asking questions. He would come from a place of ignorance or assume his own ignorance, and he would start asking questions. And usually what would happen is with his interlocutors, the people who believed themselves to be wise, Socrates would be able to ask enough questions to be able to reveal their own ignorance, which would anger and annoy his interlocutors. And so I think part of the reason why he was accused of, not believing in the Greek pantheon had more to do with the fact that he was angering the politicians and people around Athens who believed themselves to be wise. But his admirers, Socrates' admirers, were followers of his. And these were people, they were young people. They were youths, teens and early 20s males, typically, who already understood that they were ignorant, that they didn't know enough. And so they enjoyed Socrates' method because it taught them something. They were able to take those questions and learn something. So the Socratic method is designed for people who understand that they're already coming from a place of ignorance, and it allows them to explore just about any topic that you can imagine simply through asking these open-ended questions.
The word ignorance is very is funny to me because, and it was explained to me one time, a friend of mine who I've learned a ton from, and actually who kind of led me down the path of being an anarchist. But he said ignorance is not. It doesn't mean that you don't have the ability to learn. It just means you don't know. Because usually when people say, "Well, you're just ignorant," they use it as like a
pejorative.
Yeah, and so when you think about it and what he was saying. When he said that to me, I was like, okay, it doesn't mean that person's stupid. It just means they don't know.
No, and the way I was, I had a teacher in high school, my senior year of high school. She explained this to us. She said, stupidity is when you have knowledge and you don't use it.
There you go.
Ignorance is when you don't have the knowledge.
Right.
And we all are ignorant about one thing or another. Like we do not have the capacity to actually know all things. And
I like to think that I do, though. and anybody that knows me knows that that's not true. And I know that's
right.
not true about me, but I like to think that I know everything. And I have answers for everything, but I don't in reality. I mean,
well, and it's interesting because, Socrates, if you look at the difference between Socrates' interactions with his interlocutors and then those who were admirers or followers of his, he never considered himself to be a teacher. He didn't think that he could teach anybody anything. He said, I can't teach you anything. I can only make you think. And so what would inevitably happen is he would use the same method. There was really no difference between the way he was interacting with his interlocutors and the way he was interacting with his admirers. The key difference between those two groups of people was their own intellectual humility. So Socrates believed that wisdom began from understanding your own ignorance.
Yeah, and that's cool. Because, and I was talking about my friend. He's been a mentor of mine, and he kind of used the same method, I think, with me. Like, he worked for the government, but I didn't know he was an anarchist. And I remember asking him when I was starting to think about anarchy a little bit. I asked him about it. He goes, well, what do you think anarchy is? Like, he didn't shove it down my throat, but he's an anarchist. You know what I'm saying? And I told him this too. I was like, I really appreciate you not force feeding me anarchy, because I would have rejected it immediately. Like, you allowed me to think about it, and you allowed me to ask questions without shoving it down my throat. And I'm trying to be that way with people when I'm trying to talk to people about anarchy myself, and not just trying to shove it down the throat. Now, sometimes I'm like, you know what? This is the only way that this is going to work. If we go to a voluntary society, this is it. But they're going to reject that. I can't force that on people. They have to come to that conclusion on their own. And I think that's very cool with what you're doing. I think it's very cool with how he allowed me to learn about it, ask him questions about it without even knowing he was an anarchist. And it surprised me when I found out he was an anarchist, to be honest with you, because the things he was saying was like what you hear anarchists saying.
Right.
But he wasn't shoving it down my throat. And I think that's where we have to get to that. And I apologize for getting off track if I did. But I love this. I love this idea, and I love what you're doing with this. And I hope people will listen to this and latch on to it. Mm-hmm. So what materials do you use and why? I mean, what is the reasoning?
Sure. So if we're going to have a dialogue, right, we have to talk about something. And, certainly I could use this method with anything, with any topic. In fact, I know somebody who uses the Socratic method to teach mathematics, but I use it in my seminar. So my seminar is called the Liberty Seminar. And I have a course for middle schoolers, for high schoolers, and then I also have an adult session. So all of the sessions are discussing various topics that are about a free society. They're the principles of a free society. So we are learning the skill of critical thinking by dialoguing about what it means to live in a free society. So for the middle school, we actually use the Tuttle Twins series, which is a very, very popular series of books. And Connor Boyack was very gracious in getting me a wonderful deal so that my students could have access to, my middle school students could have access to the entire series of books and the workbooks. But in addition to the Tuttle Twins, I've also created some lessons which sort of introduce some new ideas. The very first lesson that I do with the middle schoolers is to explore what ideas are. This is a very abstract sort of thing. So we explore what ideas are, the importance of making mistakes, what self-ownership is. So I use a combination of lessons that I've created and then the Tuttle Twins books. And then the high schoolers, I also use a mixture. I mix some of the lessons from a textbook from Robert Murphy called Lessons for the Young Economist. And it's sort of a high school level introduction to Mises and Rothbard and, Austrian economic theory. And throughout, we'll go through and also discuss some videos from the Out of Frame series from the Foundation for an Economic Education. And I like going through those because the creator of those videos, Sean Malone, uses pop culture to talk about these principles of liberty too. And so it's a fun way to interact with some of our favorite movies in a way that, we can talk practically about these principles. And then finally, in the adult session, I also use a mixture of lessons there as well. I use Murray Rothbard's book, For a New Liberty, which is a wonderful introduction to libertarian philosophy. And then I also discuss some other things like what education actually is. That's the first lesson we talk about, is what is the mark of an educated mind. We discuss faulty reasoning and mostly faulty reasoning in ourselves, and just learning how to identify it in others and respond to it in a gracious and an intellectual way, rather than a emotionally charged, I'm gonna fight you on social media sort of way. I also do a crash course. I have a 2-part lesson, a crash course in manipulation, what it is and how to respond to it, which I think so far has been the most popular lessons out of both of those, because it's really eye-opening for the students to be able to learn about manipulation, how that's different from influence, and how it's used by other people, and how prevalent it is in society, and then how to actually respond to it in a reasonable way. So those are the materials that I use. And typically what happens is I send out a lesson through email on a Monday, and then the students have time to go through the lesson throughout the week. It should take no more than 30 minutes to go through the lesson, but I encourage students to think about it more than that, spend some more time thinking about it. And then we have a Zoom call either on Friday or Saturday. And so we have a 45-minute Socratic dialogue discussion about what they learned. And the idea is to get the students to start learning how to ask their own questions, and start learning how to think through those things and disagree with each other graciously, and really flesh things out. So I encourage students to not be afraid to make mistakes, because we can very easily evaluate, a bad idea or a mistaken idea and understand why it's wrong, rather than just getting sort of a beat down from the instructor. No, you're points docked. You got that wrong. Sorry for you. Like we don't do that. I encourage mistakes so that we can think through it. So that's basically the process and the materials.
I love this because, and you mentioned social media, because what we do on social media a lot of times is just go back and forth with each other and don't really get anywhere with it. Like we're just arguing with each other because I've got my own set of ideals and he or she might have their own set of ideals, and we're going to put it to each other. But one thing I've noticed about doing that, I get to the point where I realize I'm not even talking to that person anymore. I'm just saying what I have to say, and if people are reading it, or like the audience,
mm-hmm. Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like It's not.
I call them quiet onlookers.
There you go.
Yep.
There you go. And I tend to, and you probably do too. Like I'll get messages from people wanting to know more about what I'm saying,
mm-hmm.
because it's resonating with them, but they don't know enough about it. They're ignorant. They're not stupid. They're ignorant. Right. They're just trying to learn something about it. And I think this is important. And I think people need to go down that path. Like I told you a while ago, I had to be able to ask my own questions to get to where I am now. And I think what you're doing with this is very important. And then people, I think if they latch onto it and they check it out, I think they're going to love it. And I wanted to ask you this too, like, because I work an insane amount of hours, and I was curious about how somebody like me could do something or be involved with your seminars, because, and you say y'all do Zoom calls on Friday and Saturday. I work Friday and Saturday, and my only day off right now is Sunday, and I don't know how much longer that's going to last. But so I was just curious if it was something that I could do on my own time.
Well, so right now the way I have it set up is, the Zoom calls are a necessary part of it, and I think even if I created, and I'm actually in the process of creating some workbooks that can sort of be done, on your own time, without the Zoom call. And that's helpful to a point. there's nothing quite like actually going through the process of the method, because having somebody who, first of all, having, and I call myself a coach. I also, I don't like the idea of thinking of myself as a teacher in this respect. I'm coaching, I'm guiding these students in learning how to critically think. But there's nothing quite like having somebody who is already skilled in the method, guiding and facilitating your own thought process. Because there are a few things that I have noticed with students, regardless of their age, and that is when they're first introduced to this idea, they don't actually know how to ask questions. And so a lot of this process is teaching them how to ask questions. And initially, it's just getting a question out there, right? Because a lot of the students will think, I don't want to actually ask a question because I'll look stupid. I'll look like I don't know what I'm talking about. And so they're hesitant. They're hesitant to even, it's too much of a risk for them to even ask the question. And so we go through this process of having them practice asking the questions. But also there's something about having to answer open-ended questions that you weren't prepared for. So one of the reasons why I enjoy the Socratic method is because whatever text, we're reading or video we're watching or lecture we're listening to, there's only so much information in that. And really the way to grab a hold of that information and make it your own is to think about it outside of the text and pull yourself out of the text. And so when we go through the Socratic dialogue, we'll start out with what the text is talking about, but eventually we start getting to questions that aren't answered by the text. And there's, I tell my students, okay, I'm going to ask you a brain stretching question now. And so I'll ask them a question that is not directly answered by the text, and they have to sit there and think about it. And, there will be this long pause, this long quiet, not terribly long, but long enough that it's just uncomfortable enough that somebody has to spit something out and say it. And there's nothing quite like going through that process. So I am developing a workbook that can eventually be used sort of, on your own time to learn some of these things, but there's nothing quite like going through the actual dialogue and going through it with a coach who understands, how to guide you through that process.
That's awesome. I really want to do this. I really want to be a part of this in some fashion, even if it's just going through a workbook or something, because I myself need to take a step back and shut up for a second and think about what I'm going to say or what, how I'm going to answer a question, and it's easy to do that like on Facebook posts because you don't have to answer immediately. But I want to be able to do this like on a one-on-one, like face-to-face conversation when people are asking me questions about what I think about politics or religion or anything. You know what I'm saying? So I want to be able to answer quickly and not say, well, I'll get back to you because I'm going to work.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I want to be able to respond adequately and not be a jerk about it because I have a tendency to do that. I know that about me. I recognize that about me, that I come in and people tell me you come across as a jerk. Okay. I know I do. But it's just very frustrating because to me, what I'm trying to explain to people, to me, it's all black and white. Like this is it, but it's not always black and white with everybody.
No, yeah.
And so they have to be able to work through their own process, like we have, how we got to where we are. You know what I'm saying? And
sure,
I tend to ramble with this, but I think I want to do this, and I hope everybody listening to this episode will check this out as well, because we need more of this. We need more of these types of conversations with each other. I'm talking about face-to-face interaction with people now, and I think we've already covered this, but one of the questions was, how does this method teach critical thinking?
So critical thinking is sort of a lost art, you might say. We're all thinkers, but we aren't at the same skill level in thinking. In fact, there's said to be 6 different stages of thinking. And the first stage is the unreflective thinker. This is a thinker who doesn't understand, they don't understand the role that thinking plays in their life, even though they are, subconsciously working through things and, because they have to make decisions about their life. But they're unreflective about it. They're not considering, what they actually know about something. They aren't considering that somebody else might have more information than them, that sort of thing. So there are these different stages of thinking. And we learn this as a skill. We learn to be better thinkers. So critical thinking is the skill that you have to develop through practice and over time and even systematically. But it begins with recognizing your own ignorance. Like once you recognize your own ignorance, then you move from being an unreflective thinker to a challenged thinker. Like suddenly, whoa, you realize that maybe you don't actually have all the puzzle pieces you need in order to build that picture. So that's what the method does. It starts with your own ignorance. And like I said, Socrates believed that the more knowledge you had about the world, the more you realized you didn't know much about the world. And that was wisdom in his view, was knowing that you didn't know. And those who had less knowledge about the world believed that they knew way more than about the world than they actually did. And psychologists actually came up with a term for this known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. And so they've been able to study and reproduce this phenomenon. And so the Socratic method is a way of bringing awareness to your own level of knowledge and ignorance. And if it's done correctly and not in a demeaning way, I don't use the method to sort of, put you in your spot and show you to be inferior to me in any sort of way. I do it in a much more caring and productive way that allows the student to explore their own lack of knowledge about the world in a very safe environment that's going to encourage them to be explorers. And so after that initial reorientation, the students are shown how to use these open-ended questions to explore ideas from their state of ignorance and grow in actual knowledge. So it's using open-ended questions to aid not only in discovery of new information, but in self-assessment and to be honest with one's own progress and how to improve and that sort of thing. So it's the beginning of a lifelong effort in learning, but you're also developing these skills that eventually start to become more second nature to you.
Love it. Can't get enough of this, I don't think.
It's a ton of fun. Like all the students, we've all had a ton of fun doing it.
And we talk about social media. And when you look at the conversation going on right now with the election coming up, and when this episode releases, it'll be right after the election. But if you look at the conversations online with people going back and forth, do you ever find yourself being like, do you just feel like you just want to hit your head on your desk repeatedly? Like, what are you doing? Y'all aren't even having a conversation. You're just arguing. You're not even thinking about any of this.
Well, I'll tell you what, understanding these different stages of thinkers and, who's actually going to respond to what, actually allows me to filter through a lot of that crap on social media. Like I can tell when I'm not going to have a productive conversation with somebody on social media. And so I choose not to engage with that because all it's going to do is fan flames and make it worse. But it does allow me to pick and choose, who I will interact with. And so I can see when somebody is asking genuine questions or is coming from a place of seeking understanding, and then I can engage with that. So in some fashion, or not even in some fashion, the idea here is that you learn these skills in an environment that's designed to be safe, like you don't get attacked, right? We don't attack each other in the seminar, but then you've learned these skills and you can take those skills and use them yourself. And you can use them out on social media. You can use them to, learn something new. Maybe you want to learn more about biology, and you go online and you start exploring biology, and you use these questions or this mode of thinking in order to teach yourself. So, there is the frustrated level that you can get just by observing people who are unreflective thinkers kind of going back and forth. But there's also that, okay, I'm aware enough of this situation that I can pick and choose. I can determine who's going to be more receptive to my dialogue and actually have a fruitful, productive conversation with them.
I've noticed that about you on your Facebook post. And I'm sitting here chuckling, thinking about something while you were talking, and I hope you didn't hear me laughing, but I was thinking about something you said on one of your posts, because you when we got back to we're going back to the coronavirus thing, and you posted something that the CDC themselves said, and some dude jumped on your post and was trying to discredit what you were saying, and you were like, take it up with the CDC, man. And I saw it. I read that. And I just died laughing. I was like, "Why are you arguing with her? She just said what they said."
Yeah. Well, and I was being a bit facetious. I mean,
yeah.
Actually, the second lesson that I do with the adults is we go through. We watch this video about how to. I'm forgetting the title exactly, but it's basically how you can use true statistics to lie about things. So we go through and, this video explains sort of how statistics has been used in the past to make very reasonable arguments and explanations that seem on their face to be self-evidently true. And then he goes through and he explains how each of those examples were actually wrong. And he uses real case studies. So he's not just making this up. But when I have gone through that lesson with the adult students, they immediately think of COVID and what we're being told in the media, using these statistics. And they say, oh, there's a bigger picture here. Yes, there is a fatality rate of such and such percent, but what does that mean in the grand scheme of things? We learn about correlation versus causation, and one of my favorite lessons is learning about spurious correlations, which are things that seem to be related but aren't actually at all. So, my post that you're referencing, I mean, I want to be able to say, go talk to the CDC, because they're the ones who are putting out this data in such a way as to make it appear to mean one thing when it may not actually mean that. And so that makes it very difficult for people who don't understand statistics to try and filter through it. And so, we're left with critically thinking through other aspects of what's going on.
All right. So I got a couple more questions before I let you go. And then I want to read something from your website that people have commented themselves about taking these classes. And I think it's very cool to get that out there, how people have responded to what you're doing. But how are these classes different from lecture style classes?
So I love this question. And I use this question in I have an initial one-on-one with my students where we talk about, what the expectations are. And so I'm going to throw a question back at you, Craig.
Oh, gosh. I was not prepared.
That's okay. I want you to think about, when you think about learning something or education, what do you think about? Describe that basic process to me.
When I think about education, are you talking about public schools, or?
You tell me, what's your impression? What comes to mind when you think about how are we educated? What's the typical process?
You go to school for 12 years. You go to public schools, and we're educated by teachers in these classes. and we just learn what they've taught us without even thinking about what they're teaching us. But I don't really believe that's actually education, though. I think education is something that you learn through life.
So go back to that classroom environment, okay? And stick yourself in that desk, right? You're a kid again, you're in school, and think about the environment, okay? You're sitting there in that desk and you have a teacher. What is the teacher doing?
Talking continuously, and I'm falling asleep. If you want me to be completely honest, like when I moved from Texas to Arkansas, I was halfway through my senior year in high school, and everything that I had learned in Texas, they were already teaching. They were teaching in Arkansas, so I already learned it. So I slept like my last semester of high school.
Yes.
Through my classes because I was bored out of my mind.
You weren't engaged. You were bored. Now, so your teacher is telling you stuff, right? Or maybe she's reading to you, or you're reading out of a textbook, but you're being given information, right? Now, how do they assess? How do they tell if you've learned that information?
Well, they make you take a test or a pop quiz or something of that nature. That's how they gauge if you've learned anything, which,
yeah,
you know what I'm saying? I wasn't really listening, so I don't know if I learned anything or not.
Yeah. So so I'm asking you these series of questions to help you think through what a lecture style class is. So a lecture style class is this idea that you have one person who has all the knowledge, or most of the knowledge, which is the teacher, and then another person who has no knowledge, who needs knowledge. And we have this idea that the teacher is there to sort of pour knowledge into your head, and your job as the learner is to regurgitate what just got poured into your head. And so the test is really just a test of memory recall to see if you recall the information that was taught to you. But you're right, they don't engage the class. Right. And by not engaging the class, you're actually not activating parts of the brain that are necessary for learning that information. And so lecture style classes often don't actually go far enough. They don't engage the students in any sort of dialogue that gets their brains working through the information. And two, they're only testing the student for memory recall. And, you know, our own memories work differently per person, and our memories are only going to work at their peak if we've engaged in the material. So the way the reason why this is, or the way the Socratic method is different from a lecture style class is I don't give a lecture. Right? We have an assignment, a reading, or, you know, something to watch or listen to, and we take that information and we have a dialogue about it. And I tell my students, you know, I might have an idea about something, or I might give you a response to something that you think is wrong. And how many times, Craig, did you take a test and you were convinced that you were right about an answer, but it got marked wrong? How many times did that happen to you?
Well, my grade scores are evidence.
But there were times where you thought, I'm sure I'm right about this answer, but you weren't given an opportunity to really defend it and you know, make the case that you were right about it, right?
Right. So when, yeah, that makes sense because, like I said, I'm right about everything in my own head. So so if I don't have a chance to defend my position, I'm going to disengage.
Right.
Pretty quickly. And so we talked about this a while ago. You're going to try and force feed me something that I'm not going to acknowledge because I think you're wrong. Even if I'm wrong, you're not going to allow me the chance to find out on my own that I'm wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're just telling me that I'm wrong without letting me explain why I think I'm right.
So, you know, that's, again, this is the same teacher that I referenced before, one of my favorite teachers in high school. She told us, she said, look, if I mark you wrong on something and you think you're right, if you can come to me and defend your case and make a case for why you're right, I'll give you credit for it. And she was one of the only teachers who did that. But really what that opened the opportunity for was for us to have a dialogue with her so that we could flesh out why we were wrong. And that was the learning process. So, in these Socratic sessions, I'm not lecturing. I'm not sitting here saying, up on high, saying, I've got all the knowledge and I need to pour this into your head, right? We are taking these ideas and we are thinking through them, and we're testing them with examples and comparing and contrasting and really getting to know those ideas and thinking through them in such a way that the students are able to process through it and kind of own that information. And then they understand it at a way deeper level. And that actually gets locked in, not just into short-term memory, but into long-term memory as well. So that's essentially the difference between a lecture style class and a Socratic seminar, which I gave you a little ad hoc introduction to. Yeah.
I love it. I mean, I think we need more of that. I mean, because I really think that it's important that if we could just sit down and just talk to each other and have conversations and learn things that we didn't know before, even if we thought we knew them. You know what I'm saying? I think we need more of that. Like, there's not a lot of that going on right now. I don't think there's any of that going on really. Like, because other than what you're doing, and I'm sure there's other people doing it, but when you look, and I always go back to social media, when you look at these conversations that people are having with each other, it's gross.
Yeah.
And I'm tired of it. And it's exhausting for me to watch this because nobody's learning from each other.
Yeah.
Like, I could sit down and have a conversation with Kerry, or I can sit down and have a conversation with Joe Schmo, and we can learn from each other.
Yeah.
Now, we may not come to an agreement at the end.
And that's okay.
And that's okay. Exactly.
Yes.
That is completely
okay. That's okay. Like, we don't want everybody, we actually don't want everybody thinking like us, because that would be very boring and we would get nowhere.
I don't know. I kind of want people to think like I do all the time because it would make my life so much easier.
I'll tell you what, though, I had one of my students who took my first adult seminar. When she signed up for the class, and she told me this after the 15 weeks was done, she told me, she said, Kerry, when, because I asked them, what were your expectations for the class? And, were those expectations met? She said, when I heard that you were doing a Socratic method, what I thought was, and she mentioned this YouTuber that sort of became famous among, libertarian people. His name is Jan Helfeld. And he would use the Socratic method, these open-ended questions, in more of a devious sort of way. He was really trying to pin down and show the people he was asking questions that they were fools and they didn't know what they were talking about. And so when she signed up for my class, she thought, oh, I'm going to finally learn how to argue in such a way as to put somebody in their place and make them realize that they don't actually know what they're talking about. And she said, I was surprised, Kerry, when what you did was you actually took me through my own thought process and had me evaluate myself and my own thought processes and where I needed to improve my own thinking. So that was really interesting, because it's sort of, it tells you something about, this world that we live in with social media and that desire to be right? That desire to not even to be right, but to win an argument and not even understand why you are right, or maybe you're wrong and you don't even realize it. So learning critical thinking is not about one-upping somebody else. It's about self-improvement.
Yeah. And I think that's cool too, because I think it's happened with everybody. When you get into a debate with somebody and they point something out and you realize you're wrong about something, it almost feels like a gut punch. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, wait a second. Maybe, what if everything I've been saying is wrong then?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if that's right or not, but for me personally, like, because that's how I've learned from people, is being wrong about things.
Yeah, well, and I tell my students we're more often wrong than we are right. And that gut punch that you feel, that's you at that challenged thinker stage, right? You've just come to the realization that you don't actually know what you think you know. And part of this process is actually becoming comfortable with not knowing, because in order for you to actually get beyond not knowing, first you have to acknowledge that you don't know. Being able to make the statement, I don't know, is difficult for some people.
Well, it's an ego issue, I think.
Right.
Maybe for me, maybe not for everybody, but for me, like I get a bruised ego if
Yeah.
I
Well,
realize I was wrong about something and been what I've been so adamant about what I was saying.
that's that challenge thinker stage. And if you remain bruised ego and you can't get beyond that, you go back to unreflective thinker, right? If you don't evaluate why you felt the gut punch, why, and one of the things that we do is we talk about how our feelings connect to our thoughts. But if you can't get beyond that gut punch, you're never going to be able to really get into being a practicing thinker. And so, one of the skills that we develop, one of the first skills that you develop in the Socratic process is intellectual humility, and being able to say, I don't know, or gosh, I was wrong about that. Being comfortable saying that, because you have to be comfortable in order to start asking the questions that give you the knowledge you need in order to come to a place of knowing.
There you go. That's awesome. All right, one more question, and then, like I said, I want to go to your website and read some things that people have said about your seminars. But what skills do students develop as a result? I think we've probably covered this throughout this episode, but I want you to pin it down. What skills do students develop?
So there are some more practical critical thinking skills, like learning how to compare and contrast, clarifying issues, conclusions, and beliefs, refining generalizations and avoiding oversimplification, and understanding the difference between a generalization and an oversimplification. Again, understanding how your thoughts connect to your feelings. There's, Ben Shapiro is very famous for saying facts don't care about your feelings, but I think your feelings actually care about facts. And so your emotions give you some sort of indication of what you need to do with that information. We don't want to act off those emotions, but they are indicators of what direction we need to take. Some more abstract things that we develop throughout the course is, again, intellectual humility, intellectual courage, being able to actually defend a position you do believe is true and right, developing intellectual integrity, independent thinking, again, self-awareness, fair-mindedness, and then perseverance and confidence and reason. One of the reasons why somebody can be comfortable saying, I don't know, is because they are confident enough in their own ability to be able to work through that issue and understand it's okay to not know, as long as you're seeking a positive end to that, whatever it may be. So those are some of the skills that we develop over the course of the 15 weeks, but you continue to develop these over time as well as you continue to practice them. And the idea is after the 15 weeks, you want to continue practicing them.
Yes, I want to do this. Like I said, if I can find some freaking time with work, but I want to read a couple of things from your website on these Socratic messages, these students that have taken it. And I think this really solidifies what you're doing, because just having these types of endorsements are cool, because you can tell by reading what they're saying, it has changed the way they think about things. And here's one, I'm not going to mention people's names, but that she said, we have been so thankful to find Kerry Baldwin's Zoom class. Learning about the Socratic method while reading the Tuttle Twins books every week has really been fun and helped not only my teenager, but the whole family expand our knowledge of liberty themed topics and also learn effective ways of communicating with others that have differing ideas. Creating a dialogue where both participants exhibit mutual respect for each other and seeking to truly understand where the other person is coming from is a skill we all need to develop more, especially in today's reactive social environment. And I cannot say that out loud enough, because that is so true. And she said, asking thoughtful questions, pausing to really listen is an invaluable skill I'm grateful to be cultivated in my son with Kerry's help. I absolutely recommend this class for middle school, high school, and any adult wanting to understand the concepts discussed within this course. I am positive it will pay dividends for many years to come. We will most likely take it again soon. That's cool, man. Like what she said is awesome and she's so right.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Well, and her son was in my middle school course, and I really, really love doing this with the middle school kids and I've done it with kids as young as elementary, but we tend to treat kids as not having the capacity to critically think. But I don't see it that way at all. When I engage kids in these conversations, you would be surprised what they come up with. The mind of the child is absolutely amazing. And I love watching their wheels turn and watching them work through it and grow.
Well, their questions are so honest.
Yeah. Well, but they also, when they are given that safe environment to make a mistake, which you don't get that in public school. And I did have 2 public schoolers that just couldn't quite come out of their shell. One of them started to, and he did really, really well. But the public school really hammers this down and keeps critical thought completely out. In fact, not just out, but they make the students fearful of critical thought. And so when a child is in that safe environment, they know that they're safe and free to make mistakes. Then they're free to explore these ideas. And when they're given that environment, they can actually come up with some pretty stinking good ideas, and they make the connections that they need to connect, right? And I had one student who, when we went over the concept of self-ownership, I didn't bring God into it at all, but he did. He said, "You know what? I just realized this is self-ownership in relation to each other, but this is stewardship in relation to God." Like, he figured that out. I didn't teach him that. He was able to take these skills and process through that and learn not only how he related to other human beings, this is a middle schooler, but how he related to God. And he got it exactly right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is so cool, man. I think we do look at kids like they don't know things. They're ignorant. But in reality, they probably know a whole lot more than we do, because they're coming from it with, like, out of innocence. Like, we've been run through the gamut as adults, like we've been through all of this. But I love this because what we try to get across as our message as anarchists or libertarians or just being liberty-minded people, I think the younger generation is where it's going to have to happen. And I think that we need them to be involved with this a lot more than we think we need them to, because we're not going to be able to change it in our, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 45, and talking to people my age or close to my age, they're just so dug in about their ideals. But when you get a kid that's still trying to explore the world and try to understand things, I think that it's important that we listen to them.
Well, and a child's brain is still developing, and in many ways is so much more active than an adult brain. Like, in an adult brain, our pathways are already created, and in order to change those pathways, you have to sort of undo them and then work to redo new ones. And that's a difficult process. And so that's sort of why you have, older generations are more stuck in their ways, is because these pathways are already built. And it takes a process to deconstruct them and reconstruct something new. It's not impossible. You can do it, but it's harder the older you get. But with kids, their minds are like sponges. They're soaking up the information, and their brains are working, and their brains are specifically working toward the end of making these connections. So the more you have these dialogues with kids and just let them think, the faster they'll catch on. And it truly is. It amazes me every single time I have these conversations with these kids, because they get it.
That's cool. Yeah, I think my brain just tells me to take a nap most of the time. That's where I'm at in my knowledge. Just go to sleep, Craig. Wake up and think about it tomorrow. But anyway, I really appreciate you coming on and telling us about this. This has been a cool conversation. I think that people listening will really enjoy doing this or being a part of this because it's important. Even if you're an old man like me, you can still get there. And I think we need more of this. We need more of what Kerry's doing. And I really appreciate what you're doing. And I think it's very cool that you're taking the time to do this with people that you don't even know personally, maybe. And I really appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, thanks.
So why don't you tell people where they can find you and find out more about the Socratic seminars?
Yeah, so you can go to my website, which is just courses.mereliberty.com. That's MERE liberty.com. I also have just started a Facebook group where people can come to sort of learn more about the method and just information generally about critical thinking and how I use it in the course. So I've got some videos up there. I've got some little infographics about all the different stages of thinking. I will have at some point in the very near future an interview that I did with my own adult students from the summer session, and then a recorded Socratic seminar with them so that you can get an idea of how it works. Registration will close for the spring semester, which the spring semester begins on January 4th. Registration will close on December 28th, and I only have it open for about 8 weeks prior to each new semester beginning. But you can find all the information on courses.mereliberty.com, and you can also join my Facebook group if you just search for Mere Liberty Courses or Liberty Seminar. You should be able to find it. I'll also have a link for that Facebook group on my website.
Sweet. I think I'm going to go and join that group and just kind of be an audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like a spectator, just so I can just kind of watch this go down and I might have some questions along the way, but just to kind of get a feel for it myself. So if that's the only way I can participate right now with work, but I mean, I think I'm going to go join that Facebook group, or hope you'll let me into your Facebook group.
Yeah. Everybody can join, and I'm hoping that I can really, answer questions and interact with people who are trying to get more information about it and how it works and why it's so effective. And so it'll be, hopefully, it will be, active with all of that going on.
Cool, man. I really appreciate this, and I really, like I said before, I really, really appreciate what you're doing, and keep it up.
Well, I thank you for having me on your show so I can talk about it. I really appreciate that.
Well, there's a lot of people out here rooting you on, I promise you. And
thank you.
Just keep it up. If you ever get discouraged about anything, just remember we're back there we're spectating.
Oh, thank you.
Clapping for Kerry Baldwin.
You're so sweet. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Kerry. And I will definitely have you back on the show. I really enjoy our conversations.
Yeah, this is fun.
Hey, folks. Craig here. And I'd like to let y'all know we are always looking for writers to contribute to our blog. I don't care if you have any experience or not. 2 or 3 of our contributors had no prior experience writing, and it turns out they have a real knack for it. Our project coordinator helps them put the articles together, and she publishes them on our website and Facebook page, and you will also have the option to come on the show and go more in depth about your article. So if you like what we're doing at The Bad Roman and would like to try your hand at writing, then send us an email at thebadromanpodcast@gmail.com. We're having a blast with this project, and we would love for you to join us in helping promote it.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Bad Roman Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you find your podcasts to never miss an episode. And while you're at it, if you like what you heard, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, it really helps people find us. 100% of donations are given to local charities in Memphis, Tennessee. To learn more about the Bad Roman Project and to find show notes, please visit thebadroman.com.